Welcome to this very special edition of The Author's Voice with KAJ, a show where we explore the stories behind the stories. Here we dive into the worlds created by authors, discover their inspirations, and ensure that you walk away inspired and enriched. And today we have with us author Phyllis Leavitt. She is the author of America in Therapy, a new approach to hope and healing for a nation in crisis. She has also written two books earlier on, Light in the Darkness and Into the Fire. And latest book, America in Therapy, we'll talk about that today. Welcome to the show, Phyllis.
Well, thank you so much for having me here, AJ. It's really nice to be here with you. And thank you for the opportunity to talk about America in Therapy.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to this special edition of the Author's Voice with KAJ. And we'll come to the book. But first, Phyllis, a bit about your journey itself. What inspired you to become an author in the first place? Was it a conscious decision? Was it just accidental? Tell us a bit for the audience.
Well, it probably wasn't accidental because I always felt a great affinity to writing when I was very young. Starting in grade school, really, I loved, and junior high school especially, I loved writing papers, I loved reading books, I loved thinking about ideas. And I started writing poetry when I think I was 13. And then I kept many, many journals and I wrote little pieces. So writing has always kind of been my best way of connecting with myself. So it probably isn't accidental that I ended up writing 3 books.
Absolutely, 3 books. So let's today talk about this latest book of yours, America in Therapy. We'll talk about that. So first, how did you, earlier your book was where, Light in the Darkness and Into the Fire. And this now straightway to America in Therapy. What inspired this particular book of yours?
Yeah, well, when I was in my 30s, I went to therapy myself for the first time to really explore some of what was causing me distress in my own life. And I had some early childhood trauma that I had buried and I was beginning to remember. And so when I went to therapy, the first time, it really changed my life. I began to understand that our early conditioning and the things that happen to us and shape the way we feel about ourselves and our coping mechanisms and what we believe about other people is really quite profound. And out of my experience being in therapy myself, I decided to become a therapist. So I became a therapist. I've had a practice. I'm now retired, but I had a practice for 34 years. I worked with, hundreds of individuals, couples, children, families, and I began to see really I had the idea for this book a long time ago. And what I began to see was that all groups of people operate on family systems dynamics, that the roles we learn as children, whether we're compliant or we're rebellious or we're avoidant, or we become addicted, or we become people pleasers, or we become driven as a way to survive and cope with whatever our conditioning is, that we tend to take those roles with us into our adulthood and play them out in our businesses, in schools, in our adult families, in our communities, and in government. And I began to see that we could look at our country, America, as a family, and how is our family functioning? Is it loving and helpful toward all people? Is it discriminatory? Does it withhold from some people and target some people? Does it, are we operating as a healthy family in America? And if not, why not? Because that's really the goal of therapy. It's not to accuse people. It's not to blame. It's not to shame. It's not to punish. It's really to understand the roots of our dysfunction so that we can heal, our family relationships or our couple relationships or our parent-child relationships or our employer-employee relationships. And why couldn't we bring those same healing principles to the divisiveness and escalating violence in our country? And really, it's not just America, because these things are happening all over the world. So I felt like the lens of psychotherapy and psychology and healing our human relations rather than feeding the divides was the missing piece in our national conversation here in America. And I wanted to bring that to America and really to the world, because essentially it's nonpartisan. It's not about who's right and who's wrong. It's not about somebody winning and somebody losing. It's about how do we come together and hear each other and resolve our differences peacefully for the sake of the good of the family. Because that's what we want from parents, right? We want parents to resolve their differences peacefully for the sake of themselves and their children and all future generations. So that's the inspiration behind my book.
Absolutely, absolutely. So how does this book has been out now since some months now. How do
Right.
you see this whole changing of administration in the US? And do you think it will it is working towards your goal, or you seem that the task has become much more different, difficult, perhaps in the new administration, new circumstances that the US is in at the
Yeah.
moment.
I mean, definitely think there's a place for what I'm saying that I think is really important, because I think on a national level, we don't have the conversation right now about how do we bring us back together? How do we heal our great divides? How do we find a way to include other people that may be different than us? And these are some of the big principles on which our country was founded. So yes, I think we're in great need of bringing America to therapy, and maybe even more so than when I actually wrote the book. you know, and I certainly felt that motivation before the last election, but I definitely feel it now, and I really feel like many, many more people than maybe we'd like to imagine or that the world knows really do want a healing conversation. Most people do not want more violence in their life. They do not want more hatred in their life. I don't think most of us want more war in our lives, or the fear of war or the threat of war. I think people are basically good. I think they basically want to love and care for their families. And I think I'm speaking to a much bigger audience than maybe the news would have us believe. That's what I think.
Absolutely, absolutely, and many people do believe that the world
Right,
is still a good place, that there are
right,
good people out there,
right.
and whatever the circumstance, everybody is behaving. But in terms of the book itself, how have you dealt this difficult subject in the book? Have you focused more on the problem, or have you focused more on the solutions?
Well, I think that's a really great question, because that's what therapy does. It actually focuses on both. If we can't, like a doctor, if you can't actually diagnose the problem, it's very difficult to treat it. But so a doctor, if we take, our bodies and our physical health, really needs to have some expertise in diagnosing what's causing that pain, what's causing that infection, what's the result of that injury, and how is it impacting the rest of the body. We have to have that knowledge. And I think in the world of psychology, we know a lot today about what are the roots of violence, what are the roots of hatred, what are the roots of discrimination and aggression, or passivity or compliance with something that's abusive. We know this from working with hundreds and hundreds and thousands of families over the years. So it is really important to identify the problem, but not from the point of view of blame, not from the point of view of who's right and who's wrong, because we don't do that in therapy. We might say this is abusive and these are the effects it's going to have on your children if you don't stop hitting them or shaming them or excluding one and putting the other one at the top of the totem pole. But that's only half of it. So half of the book is the diagnosis of, like, what are the roots of violence? And basically, violence is the root of violence. Hatred is the root of hatred. So how do we break that cycle? So the other half of the book is dedicated to what are the healing principles of psychotherapy? How do we get people to sit down and really go into their pain and try to uncover what happened to them so that they can heal their own pain, so that they don't repeat it in their present relationships by acting it out either on themselves or their partners or their children or their employees? How do we heal the roots of our own pain so that we don't repeat it? And how do we see that? How do we take that model of family dysfunction? What happens when parents are abusive? And how do we break that cycle? How do we help people break the cycle of violence on a larger level? Because really, the way I see what's going on in the world today is that we're at a very critical place. We are a family of human beings. And if we don't heal the family of humanity, we're going to have more war. We're going to have more aggression. We're going to have more exploitation. We're going to have more discrimination. And these things just escalate if that cycle is not interrupted. And we have so many tools and understandings at our disposal today to help heal that cycle. And again, it's not about win-lose. It's about win-win. And so a lot of what I talk about in my book, America in Therapy, are what are the principles of that? And here are some of the big, I'll give you just some of the big paradigm shifts that I talk about, and the details of that, of course, are in the book, and we don't have time to go into the details. But, some of the big paradigm shifts we're looking at, and one of the biggest ones is this, that in the best psychotherapy, in the best healing modalities, we commit to nonviolence, because violence makes us all unsafe, and no one heals in an atmosphere of unsafety or the threat of violence. What all that violence does is inspire us to our defenses and our offenses, because we're in protection mode. So one of the first principles of the best healing is we put our weapons down and we leave them outside the door, and I'm not talking just about physical weapons, I'm talking about emotional violence, mental violence, withholding, addiction, all of the things that we look toward to help heal our pain. We leave those at the door and we commit to nonviolent communication. And that's a bottom line for healing. And we're a far cry from that in the world. We still believe that we have to arm ourselves to be safe. But I'll tell you this, and I talk about a million things, so you can interrupt me at any point. But what I have found, and I really believe this is a principle of our existence now, is that there's only one thing that will ever make us safe, and that's safe people. Safe people don't pick up guns and go shoot up a school. They don't want to start a war. They don't build nuclear weapons. They really want to work things out. And that's one of the bottom lines. So one of the big principles I talk about in the world of psychology is how we deal with power. Because right now we're living in a power over model, a domination and forced submission model of human relations. And we can see from history, over and over and over again, that so often people who have been dominated into submission rise up and become the dominators. And then the cycle repeats, only with different players. And in the world of psychology, we really look for our equal worth, our equal value, our equal rights. And, if you have any exposure to the world of mediation, and some of the principles of mediation are in the best psychology and the best psychotherapy, we sit down as equals at the table with a desire to work it out. We're committed to either working it out and finding a compromise, or understanding each other deeply and listening deeply so that we can reach some kind of resolution. Or if we can't reach resolution and we'll never agree, then we agree to leave each other alone in peace. And we know that from the world of couples therapy. When people get divorced, sometimes they just can't work out their differences or their anger or their hurt or their fear. And for the sake of themselves and their children, we always advocate that they just leave each other alone in peace. And of course, these things are very hard to do when you feel hurt, when you feel angry, when you feel scared. And I always say, and I talk about this in the book again, like a million things, that it's much harder to wage peace than it is to wage war. But we need to wage peace because our survival is at stake and the welfare of our children and all future generations is at stake in the world we live in. So that's one of the principles. I'll tell you one more real quick, and then you have to read the book to see what the rest of them are. But um, another one is to really embrace our dependency on each other. Because we live, I don't know what it's like where you are, but in the world I live in, I think in America to a large degree, and this isn't true for all people, of course, we still really idolize this ideal of independence. I don't need anybody. I have my own car. I have my own house. I have my own income. I have my own personal trainer. I have my own whatever I have. And we kind of still idealize like the self-made man and pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. And while there's a place for appropriate adult independence and autonomy and self-starting, we really are dependent on everyone in this entire world for our existence today. And I think we don't embrace that. Um, we really depend on the people who make our cars, who pump the water into our homes, who provide the electricity, who manufacture the computers, who grow our food. We depend on all of them. There's very few people in America today who are totally self-sufficient, and probably very few people in the world who are totally self-sufficient. And maybe there's more people in other parts of the world who are self-sufficient than in America. I don't know. But I think we have to really understand, just like in a family, we need each other. We need each other's love. We need each other's support. We need each other's well wishes. We need each other to be safe and not to engage in violence. And for me, 9/11 really taught me that in a very personal way because it was a strike on the country that I live in. And in my lifetime, there had never been any strike from another country on America. And it made me really realize we depend on everybody to be safe. And why could we not then commit to make this a safer world rather than build up our store of how we're going to defend and protect ourselves? Because I don't think that actually really protects us. Just like if a family is stockpiling guns to protect themselves, are they safe? No. They're likely to act out with those guns on themselves and other people and not work out what would actually have them safe, which would be restoring themselves to loving, kind, safe, nonviolent communication and connection.
Absolutely, very well put, Phyllis. And I was just listening to it and appreciate your thoughts, the gravity of your thoughts, the purity of your thoughts, and the wish and the hope for the future. But I want to understand, who is this book for? Is it for the politicians? Is it for the for those people who are making guns? Is it for people who are indulging in violence and for very selfish interests? Who is this book for?
Well, in a great, again, that's a great question. And I often get asked that question. And I always say it's for everyone because of course, I would love it to be in the hands of many politicians. And I've actually sent my book to many politicians and people in the courts and people who are activists because part of my commitment is that I believe that in America today, and I don't know what it's like in other countries, but I think it's not that different. We don't really have a basic understanding of psychology. It's not like a requirement. It's not one of the, reading, writing, and arithmetic in our schools. And I think it really needs to be. I think we need to understand how we're made up psychologically and emotionally and mentally if we're ever really going to resolve what's going on in the world, because people don't understand for the most part that they're just in action reaction mode most of the time. You do this, I do that in reaction to you. But I think what the average person still doesn't really know is that when I'm out of control, when I'm overreacting, or when I'm shut down and I'm depressed and I don't come out of my room, or I'm drinking too much, or I'm a real people pleaser and that's how I think I'm going to survive, that we're really on survival and we're not thriving in those defensive modes of being. And that inside of us, if we could go back down in a safe place, which I believe therapy provides and an understanding of psychology really helps with, if we could be in a safe place and work through our own wounding, we become those safe people for other people. In all my years as a therapist, and I've worked with, massive abuse and neglect in many of my clients, and it's actually much more common than I think many of us know or would like to think. Um, Physical violence, sexual violence, mental violence, emotional violence, abandonment, being in an addicted family where people aren't available or acting out their rage. Um, so many people just repeat those patterns without, when they have a chance to really heal what happened to them, especially early in life, they don't repeat those patterns. They have access to a healed place in them that in their adult self, more or less, and none of us does this perfectly. So I don't want to say there's like you get healed and then you're a perfect human being. It's an ongoing process. But more or less, you have choice about how you respond to the difficulties in your life. Okay, I see you're really reacting to me. You're triggering me. I feel angry or I feel hurt or I want to disappear or I want to avoid you and never talk to you again. But my adult self, who's had a chance to heal, actually really wants to try to talk to you and hear you and be heard in a safe way. And again, this is monumental for most of us because we've actually been taught to win the argument rather than win the relationship, right? You're smiling, so tell me what you're thinking.
No, no, no. That's it. You are so right. Means we are so focused on winning the argument, not to win the relationship. And unfortunately, these are happening not just in offices but at home also. And when these things
Right.
happen at home, nobody is a winner.
That's right. And that's my point of like taking the analogy of the family, one family, mother, father, children, extended family, and a country or an organization, because that the same principles apply. And to the extent that we heal them in ourselves, in our homes, we're going to bring that into the world. And that's really my hope. When you ask me who the book is for, and when I say the book is for everyone, I really mean that, because if I just apply these principles in my own life, I'm going to raise my children differently. I'm going to interact differently with the people at work. I'm going to change my values when it comes perhaps to how I vote or who I support or what I donate money to. I'm going to change the way that I interact in the world. And I really think that if change is going to happen, it's going to happen on the grassroots level. Because many of the people that are in positions of the greatest power right now don't have access to this kind of healing information and may not want it, because power is very addictive in and of itself.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, what was the most challenging part of writing this book?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. I think the most challenging part of writing the book was um, really narrowing down some of the principles that I wanted to share with the world, really, and do a lot. I did a lot of research for the book. I have a lot of case study examples of the things I'm talking about. I have a lot of things from the news and from the current events in America today, and in a little bit in some other places, but mostly in America. So the challenge was really to hone it down, because I don't know if I had mentioned this to you before, but before I found an editor, I had 120,000 words written and I had endless chapters written, and I really needed help to hone down the message and really find that balance between the diagnosis and what are the possible cures. So I really tried to make it very, very succinct in the book. And that is a great challenge. And I would say for anybody out there writing a book, get a good editor because getting a good editor actually really made this a much better book than what I had written by myself.
Absolutely. So, What is the key message, in a nutshell, if you want readers to take away from this book?
Well, I called the book America in Therapy, A New Approach to Hope and Healing. And I think what the basic message is, there is hope. There is hope for us to heal. In America, there's hope for us to heal as world citizens if we have the will to heal rather than keep on waging conflict with one another and trying to win. And so the message is, I really believe people are good. I don't think there's a baby born on this earth who's an evil human being. I think we learn terrible behaviors from other people who have also been injured. Oh, and let me say this, because this is such a big, important point in the book that I think most people actually really don't know if you haven't studied psychology at all. And that is, we have many perpetrators in the world. We have perpetrators in the family, we have perpetrators in schools, we have perpetrators in business, and we have perpetrators in government. And one of the greatest gifts of the best psychology is the understanding that inside the perpetrator is an unhealed victim. And we have to know that. And we have to address that if we're really going to change our human relations. In some of the research that I did for my book, one of the things that I discovered was that in the prison system in America today, well over 50% of the incarcerated people in America today have unhealed childhood trauma. And that really says it all. Like, if we don't give ourselves a chance to heal, if we don't commit our resources and our willpower and our man hours to actually healing ourselves and other people, well, if we do, let me just say, we could break this cycle. And we wouldn't have prisons filled with criminals because we would be committed to rehabilitation, and there wouldn't be the kind of recidivism that we see today, because people get out of prison, they never had a chance to heal what hurt them. They go back into the same unhealed environment they were in before, and the chances of them repeating whatever they did that was dysfunctional and harmful is very high. So for me, besides the fact that I just say in a big way there's hope and healing for humanity, I really believe that one of the takeaways from my book is we need to focus on our families. We need to focus on our children and teach them a new way to be in this world. So I would love to see our tax dollars and our man hours and our expertise really be refocused away from defense to healing, to rehabilitation, to healing, to creating a safe environment for our children to grow up in, to stop looking at addicts and some of our criminals as just bad people, and really try to find the essential person in them who can heal and change. That's what we see in the world of psychology in our offices, and it can't be any different for the human race.
Absolutely, absolutely, Phyllis. So these two books, this is the third book. What next? Any particular book in the making?
Yeah, I actually do. I have a couple of ideas for the next book. One idea was just a sequel to America in Therapy, because there's a lot that didn't go in, that I didn't put in that book. There's only so much you can put in a book, and there's probably only so much that people can digest from one book. So one idea is a sequel to America in Therapy, and I have some different ideas about how I want to go about doing that. But yes, I want to continue this conversation. Yeah, and let me just emphasize here that part of the first two books that I wrote, A Light in the Darkness and Into the Fire, are really about my own healing journey as a client, and the profound connection I made to my own essential self through that process that really was the deepest source of healing. And I believe, and I've seen this happen in my practice, that when people have a chance to heal what hurt them with other human beings, what they uncover in themselves is a profoundly beautiful, essential, loving, wise human being. And so that's really part of my commitment, is that we're an untapped natural resource. We may be the biggest untapped natural resource we have. And And I think the key to that is healing the wounds that we've inflicted on each other, and the wounds that we've inflicted ourselves on other people. Because most people who have been hurt end up hurting somebody in some way, and we want to take the shame out of that. Like, yeah, that's a natural outcome. If I've been beaten, I may either beat my children, or I may find myself powerless to protect my children from someone who would hurt them. These are natural outcomes from abuse and neglect. They're not a sign of our failing. And so inside each person is a beautiful, essential, and sometimes profoundly wise person. And this is what we really want to bring to life in the world today. That's what I want to see happen. That's what happened for me. I found parts of myself that I never knew were there because I had a chance to heal. And I would like to give that gift to every human being on this earth if I had the power to do that.
Absolutely. There's so much to learn from you. And I'm sure a lot of people would want to, learn more from you, about your books, connect with you, talk about your upcoming books. What is the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, the best way for them to find my book or to reach me, or both. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, the book is available like on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, any major bookseller. The book is available on. I'm in the process also of making an audio book, but right now it's just a paperback and a Kindle book. And you can reach me on my website. That's the best place to reach me. It's my name, www.phyllisleavitt.com. You can contact me through my website. I'm happy to respond to anybody if you have questions or you want to share. I'm on all the major social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. I have on my website, I have a lot of interviews like this one. I have blogs and posts that I've written. I have lots of recordings on YouTube. So please feel free to check any of that out and write a review of my book if you feel so inclined. And I really appreciate any feedback from anyone. So, and I have someone right now who's been writing to me and asking questions and exploring different things about nonviolence and nonviolent communication with me. And it's been so enlivening to be in this discussion with people because, we never know the ripple effects of what we put out, right? You reach thousands of people probably, and you may never know all the good that you're doing in the world, but you just keep doing it because you know that somewhere somebody has picked up your message and your commitment and they're spreading it in their life. And we don't have to know, we just keep doing what we do, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of The Author's Voice with KJ. And for the audience, if you enjoyed this conversation, grab a copy of Phyllis's book and explore more. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.